Greetings, folks. This is Scott with the Game Audio Institute, and we are going to cover how to implement some audio into a game. And we're going to be using one of our very easy game lessons, the Breakout game, as an example. If you have signed up for our Patreon, information below, you can basically get this one for free. And if you don't, you can also go to the website and purchase it if you feel like doing that. But anyway, this is going to cover all of the steps that you're going to need to go through in order to be able to implement the audio into this relatively simple 2D arcade style Breakout game. And I'm also going to explain a little bit about why we make the decisions that we're making in this particular case, and other things like that. And so that's basically it. And so we'll see you inside there in just a jiffy. All right, looks like we're ready to go here. So basically, here's the deal. You will have to have already downloaded the Breakout package from the servers, from our servers, from the Game Audio Institute. And you'll either gotten a link directly to download the package, or you go to the store and you purchase that, and then you get a download link, and then you can download the package from there. Either way, what ends up happening is you will end up with a package file that will be pretty much, say, right here. And for example, and then you will have a zip file, and you will uncompress the zip file. It doesn't matter whether you have a Mac or PC. It'll work in either case, basically. And what will happen is you will uncompress this, and you'll get this folder. So this folder then has the 4 objects that you will likely need inside here, basically. So what happens is you're going to get a step-by-step PDF that has screenshots and stuff like that, and takes you through the whole implementation process pretty decently. But again, this is for insurance, just in case people want to have a video to go along with this. We also get a little bit of license agreement and a README first stuff about installation, kind of how that works essentially. It's then basically that we want to uncompress this file here, which is the Breakout Unity Audio Student file. So we'll open that up with the archive utility. If you're on a PC and you're dealing with these kinds of things, I highly recommend the 7-zip utility. It tends to be a little bit better with Macintosh-based zip files. So it'll be better in that particular case. Anyway, so now that we have this done, if you double-click this, you'll see a few different things, but most especially you'll see this assets folder and all these other kinds of things. And when you see that stuff, that pretty much means that you are you're in good shape, essentially. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to open that up inside Unity Hub. So I have Unity Hub already up and happening. So if you've never installed Unity before, it is a useful idea to watch some videos on that sort of stuff. We have a video on also how the audio system works in Unity and things like that. And I think it even covers a little bit of the mixer as well. So you can go check links like that on our YouTube site. Those are public videos, and so you can go check those out for free. Anyway, so we're basically here, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to the open dialog here and choose Add Project from Disk. And in this case, we're going to go and find our things. I know kind of where they are, really, but so go here, go to the Breakout Unity Audio Student, and Breakout Unity Audio Student. And once you see the items that are in there, you don't need to go further down than that. That's basically good enough. And then on the lower right-hand side, over here, actually, let's see how I can do this. Oh, it's kind of hard to do this, isn't it? Okay, Okay, it's my picture's covering it. But anyway, there you go. So click Add Project, and then that will open the project up inside the version of Unity that we're currently using, which is 21.1.28. 2021.1.28. And so that's the one that's currently up right now. What it does is it adds it to the list, and then you're going to click on it to actually open it up in the Unity editor of choice. Okay, so then we're going to do that. And off we go. So we wait for things to happen. It's probably not going to take too long. It's a fairly small file. It's barely even a couple megs. But sometimes it takes a little while to compile and add some things in, stuff like that. In the meantime, I guess I can sort of go over a little bit what's in the package. All right, so we'll wait I'll take a look at the. We'll take a little bit of a look at the PDF. Of course, you can take a look at the PDF yourself, but it just sort of gives an overview of the stuff in sort of a step-by-step kind of format. It talks about which versions of Unity this has been tested with, which is useful, and then kind of what the basic date of this is all essentially, and so goes through all of the different, basically the things. Now, one of the things that it doesn't go into at all is the designing of the sounds. And this video will also not cover the designing of the sounds. The designing of the sounds is, we kind of don't want to give people an idea or like that it has to sound like some particular kind of thing. So we want to kind of leave it open. I will make a video on the designing of the sounds based on my proclivities, and of course that's just one way of interpreting it, because there's a lot of different ways of interpreting it, and your feeling when playing the game is going to potentially change as a result. So anyway, so that's basically the deal there. This is all the stuff that we're basically going to go through, but you can take a look and you can follow along if you want. And I'll try to cleave pretty close to what this is doing, essentially. One thing to keep in mind is that as you open this up and you hit the play button in this, it will be broken. That's right. It will not work correctly at all. It will at least compile, but it will not work correctly because there's something very specific that has to be done. So anyway, we're going to basically go into this. So anyway, as far as the assets, again, we're not actually talking about, we're not actually going to be talking about how to design them, but they are listed right here in the step-by-step guide as to what you'll need. You'll need a paddle sound. You'll need bumper 1, 2, 3's sound. So 3 bumpers basically for left, top, and right. You'll need a block exploding sound for when the ball hits the blocks, they're going to explode. You need a defeat stinger. So that means like a musical sound effect, effectively. A fanfare for stinger when you win, the intro music loop, and then also a game music loop. And these aren't tempo aware or anything like that, so they'll sort of, again, this is sort of low tech comparatively speaking. Again, this is a simple project. We're just basically dealing with it. Let us go into the project itself, and we will talk about how things are going to work in that particular situation. So for that, I think we're basically pretty good. You're not going to see the lower right-hand corner too badly, or too much. But anyway, so what you want to do is you want to go here to the Breakout game, and you want to go to Scenes, and you want to go to the Breakout Unity Student Scene. It's pretty much the only one that's there. And you're going to double-click on that, and that's going to give you this. Now, that's going to be the scene view, of course. And so what you want to do is you want to go to the Game view. So you'll click on the Game View tab. And for that, then you'll see what's going on inside the game. Now, again, as I said, this game will be broken to begin with, because that is the way it is sort of shipped, because there are some special communication things that have to be kind of set up in order to be able to play the game correctly, or in order for the game to understand that there's something going on. So right now, if you were to play it, it's not going to play any audio. You click the little play button, and nothing's going to happen. It's going to go through the things, and the blocks don't explode. The number goes way after 54, and nothing really happens in the game. So it's basically not really playable in its current state. So we need to basically figure out that kind of stuff. So we're going to check the PDF guide and see what is going to be needed. All right, the next step is to find a prefab called audio control. So in this particular case, what happens is, you can see there's all these sort of errors that are saying, the variable audio control of Breakout game has not been assigned. That's an important piece of information, because that is exactly what we need. We need the prefab called audio control. And in this case, what you can do is you find it here under prefabs and click audio control. You can also totally drill down if you needed a very special name and you knew what the name was. You could type audio control, and you will find it basically here if you need to do that. So that's another way of doing it. So anyway, we're going to drop that in here under hierarchy, and then it's going to be there. And we will now show you what's on the right-hand side, which is basically pretty much all the audio clips that are going to be needed, just pretty much all of them, inside this game. In this particular game, because it's a 2D game, it's not 3D in any way, shape, or form. So basically, we just created ourselves a script, and I'll show you kind of what that actually looks like in a little bit. But essentially, it's just going to play all these audio clips in whatever order in terms of what the script is telling it to do, essentially. So what we need to do is go and find ourselves a bunch of audio files to be able to go and put in these kinds of things. But the first thing that we need to do is we need to associate the audio control with the other parts of the project, essentially. All right, so let's just check this out here and look underneath the audio control and see what we have. We actually have 3 objects. Audio controllers, as I said, we have all the individual things that are here, but we also have these objects underneath, and they have audio sources. So again, for the basics of Unity audio, the first thing you're going to need in order to hear audio inside the game is an audio source. So basically, these are audio source components, and some of the assets are going into these audio sources. Some of the assets are going into other audio sources. For example, all the music clips will be heading towards the music audio source, and they're going to be assigned to that music audio source. All the block exploding sound, that really means just one sound, really, is going to be going to another audio source. And then the paddle and bumper sort of sounds, whenever they're hit, are going to be able to go to a third audio source. So those 3 audio sources basically are there to essentially deal with those particular things as far as the audio is concerned. So for this, what we also want to do is grab all of our assets that we want inside this game. So click on that so you can see the files. So basically, I have a bunch of different files that are here. They're all waves. Some of them actually came from other Unity projects. So they are actually, there's these meta files that are just sort of metadata files, essentially. Not necessary for this particular project, but they came from another one. So that's why they're actually already there. So in this particular case, I have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 assets that you're going to basically need for the game. So they have to be WAV files, 44.1, 16-bit, although they could be 48 kilohertz as long as you keep the sample rate basically the same for all of them. That's fine, basically. What you're going to do is you're going to basically drag them in, and you can make yourself a folder. You can go here to the assets folder. And a typical thing to do, got to be organized inside this game. Even though there's only a few assets, it's a good idea to just get into the practice of doing this, and organizing your assets correctly. So we're going to do that. And that means we're going to grab in and say, create folder right here. Right click and create folder. So I'm going to call this audio assets. So now that those audio assets are there, there's nothing actually here. Now we can drag all of our sounds into here, and we will have audio assets. As soon as you drag audio sounds in there, they become audio clips according to Unity, and that's how they get dealt with, essentially. So now we have all these sounds. Down below, you can actually preview them, and so you can set them to play, right? All the different ones, and you'll hear them when we get going here. Have lots of fun sounds to hear, obviously. Okay, so lots of different options. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go back over here to our audio control object where we had all these things, and we're just going to start dragging them in. Now, the first thing to do that's a useful idea is to just make sure that the first sound in the game plays, essentially, right? So that we just got it already all wired up and everything like that. This is generally a very good practice to do, even when you have middleware. Go through all the steps that you need to in order to be able to make everything happen, essentially. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the audio controller. We're going to basically find the intro loop section here, and you can do one of two things. You can either take the intro loop clip, like this one right here, and you can drag it over to the field in question and release the mouse button. And that is one way to do it. Another way to do it is you can click on this little dot on the right-hand side, and from there, you'll get a screen where you can then look at the assets in whatever form. You can actually go like this if you need to look at them by name only, and you can filter them by name if you needed to, so you could look for anything with the word intro, and it'll just sort of dial down and sort of filter things out that don't match, the terminologies you have. So that's another way that you can do that. And some things inside Unity might have to be selected this particular way. Most things can be done by dragging and dropping, but once in a while, even in the audio world, there are some things that have to be done by means of this sort of little dot on the right-hand side and selecting objects. Anyway, so we're going to say intro loop. We're going to save our scene, Command S or Control S if you're on a PC, or Windows rather. And if you just do this, then basically it should play, except that it doesn't. So we have to figure out why that is eventually. So we're gonna actually deal with that. So right now that's not playing because of the fact that it's not actually hooked up at the moment. So we actually do have to hook things up and get things going. So right now it's still not actually hooked up. So we have to do a little bit of effort, in that regard. One thing I should mention though is about these audio sources. We want to make sure, because these are music and because really all the sounds in the game are non-spatial sounds. In other words, they're not 3D in any way, shape, or form. We're not playing them from a distance. We're not approaching them from a distance, or they're not going away or anything like that. So in this particular case, what you want to do is you want to find the spatial blend control and make sure on each of those audio sources that it's made sure all the way to the left, which would make it an automatically 2D sound, not affected by distance, not affected by direction. So each one of these individual items underneath here needs to have spatial blend all the way at 2D. It probably is, but just in case, good idea to always check. Another thing to check that is useful is the, what was I going to say? The other thing is also what's called the audio listener. And the audio listener is something that it has to be in every scene, even though this is a 2D game, we don't really have three-dimensional objects going on because the listener tends to be really important for those kinds of things. It does need to be, it's very usually common for them to be there for the things like that. So what happens in this particular case, the audio listener is another component. It doesn't look that impressive, I have to say. So if you type main camera, that's generally a fairly good place to look for the listener, is on camera objects, or objects that have camera components on them, I should say. But the first one that usually gets automatically put in almost every game by default is called the main camera. So always look there for the main camera. So if you look for the main camera, and if you scroll a little bit, and we flip this up a little bit, yep, you can see that there's this audio listener component right here. You can see there's almost nothing here of any worth or value, really. And that is actually because the controls governing audio, like in a sort of systems kind of way, are not actually associated with they are associated with the listener, but they're found someplace else. And in that case, they're actually found under the project settings, which is under edit, and then project settings. And then over here, in this window, you'll see all the different characteristics of all the different stuff that we have. And I'm pretty sure that the video I've shot earlier contains information about that sort of stuff. So we won't go too heavily into there. We're just going to keep this one focused specifically on the game. But more importantly, there needs to only be one audio listener in the scene. Only one. If you have more than one audio listener in the scene, it will constantly complain every frame that there's more than one audio listener in the scene. If you have no audio listeners in the scene, it will constantly complain that there's no audio listeners in the scene. So you need to have only one of these audio listeners in the scene. That's very important. And very frequently, I've had students add, extra audio listeners to the objects in the scene, and that's not a good thing. You don't want to do that because then you have to track it down, and that can be a little bit of a deal for sure. Anyway. So now what we're going to do is we're going to basically wire the audio control object so that it will actually play that sound file from our thing, essentially. So that's what's going to happen. And so let's just do that. So in this particular case, we actually are right on the correct object that we need to be for main camera. We type the word main. It automatically filters, by the way. This is when you have lots and lots of objects inside the game, of course. If you don't have a lot, then it's not a big deal. But many games have lots and lots of objects. So it's very important to be able to filter the look and of these objects and that sort of stuff. So I typed main, I get main camera, and in the Breakout game script, this is what's going to happen. What we're going to do is we're going to take that audio control that's already in our scene, and we're going to put it in this place right here, in this audio control where it says none game object. What happens is that it will use the audio control script on that game object, or in this case on the prefab, in order to be able to do its work. Now, what we need to do is look at all of the other objects inside what's called the hierarchy over here on the left-hand side. So what we want to do in that case is we want to clear out our search so we see all those other objects, right? So click that little X right there to the right, and we'll get everything back that we had before. There's our audio control. So now what we want to do is we want to drag over our audio control object into the breakout game. Don't click on anything, because if you do that, then this inspector here will change. So what you want to do is just click and drag on the audio control object and bring it over to the audio control field right there, and release the mouse button. And that's it. Okay, so now that was method number 1, of course. And there's also method number 2. Now, method number 2 has a slight caveat here. So, as you know, we found that audio control object here in the Assets Breakout Games Prefabs folder, which means that it exists technically now in 2 places. It is here in the Prefabs folder. It is also up here in the hierarchy. So that is also reflected here inside our little menu that we get when we click the dot button. So we click the dot, we get 2 tabs. 2 tabs. And those tabs say Assets, and they have Scene. So the Scene is the tab you want. You definitely want the Scene tab. So you'll want to do this and then click the audio control. If you don't do this, then something will be incorrect at that point. So if you've had issues or you're having errors or something like that, one possibility is that you might have used the wrong audio control if you chose this particular method to choose things. So do not choose the Assets tab one. Choose the Scene one. Okay? Important. So you want to click audio control, and you can double click that in order to be able to put it there. So same exact thing. So now this has been set to communicate to the audio control so that when the game does various kinds of things, various actions, then it will trigger the audio control to play that particular action. And we'll talk a little bit about how that works in a little bit. So in this particular case, so what happens is now we can probably give it a try. As long as, remember, we have our audio sources already set to 2D all across the board, and we do. So good, good, good. That's excellent. So I'm going to play this game, and I believe our audio control has 1 loop in it right now. Yes, there we go. Cool. So we're going to do that. And there we go. Our sound is happening at the beginning of the game. So good for us. Excellent. All right. So now that we've verified that, the sound plays and everything like that, and everything is working in that particular regard. Now I want to show you some other thing that can sometimes trip people up. And one of the things that happens is that people will go in and they'll start playing the game, right? Like this. And then turn down the music a little bit here. Hang on. Okay, so I can talk a little bit more. So the thing is that then what they'll do is they'll just go over here, the audio control, or maybe they won't have put that particular sound in, so there won't actually be any sound playing or something like that, right? And then they'll just start putting sounds in here, right? Which is fine to do. There's nothing wrong with that. You can totally do that. I've got all my assets here. So I can do that. I can put sounds in here, like say the music loop, right? And I can do ball. Let's see that. We'll have to do some things before we do this, but the defeat one, for example. I can put the defeat in there, so let's say that's the lose sound here, right? And then I can put the win sound in here. And it looks great, it looks fine. And now if we play this, it'll actually play correctly, right? It'll be fine. So we play it. Oops, sorry, come on. It should be played. Okay, it's fine. And you can see it's starting to play correctly. We don't have the sound effects for the bumper and the paddles, but, you know, we got the music. And not only that, if we lose the ball, it's going to play, right? So it sounds like that's great. And then what happens is we stop playing it back. And now just look what happened just now. Look what happened at the Breakout game. Notice the only thing that we see here is intro loop, and everything else is blanked out. All of a sudden, I've lost all my audio clips. I've stopped playing the game, and all my audio clips are gone. What happened? Well, what happened was you kept doing something while playing the game. So here's the thing. Knowing that you are... So what happens is that when you are in game mode, you can do stuff, but when you stop playing the game, it means that all of your sounds are going to go away. It'll revert back to where it was before you started playing the game. So that is definitely not going to be a useful situation. So what you want to do is make sure that you know when you are playing the game and when you're not playing the game, okay? So that's going to be a very important thing. So let me show you how you can basically figure out very quickly, visually, what's going on when you play the game versus when you're not playing the game, okay? So what you want to do in that case is go over to here, and inside Unity, you can go over to here to Preferences. Now, inside a Windows machine, it's under Edit and then Preferences. It's under the Edit menu, so you'd find it under here. But here in Unity, we find it under Preferences on Macs. So when you do that, you'll see that there's this thing here with all these different preferences that are listed up here. And what you're going to do is you want to go to the colors section, and what you're going to look for is this thing called Play Mode Tint. Play Mode Tint, okay? So what you want to do is click on Play Mode Tint, and then from there, what you'll want to do is just tint this slightly. Now, I'm going to probably choose some kind of bluish version because I like blue as a color generally. And a little goes a very long way for this. But what you're going to do is you're going to just, tint this just slightly blue when you play the game. And so when you click this and we close the window, it automatically saves. You don't have to click save or anything like that. And you go like here. Now, you can see that the screen is clearly blue when we are in game mode, right? So this is one of those very useful things to know when you're in game mode. And so, the screen will turn blue if that happens. Okay? All right. So that being done, now we can potentially go into the rest of the implementation, and we know that the game is starting to play now because the audio control is communicating with the the game itself. And so now what we're going to do is we're just going to go in here and just put all the things that we just put in when we were playing the game. Okay, so that'll be pretty quickly here. Just go in here, take the music loop, put that, oops, sorry, nope, that's not the one. That was bad. We're going to do this again. Right there, cool. All right, so then the wind sound is going to be fanfare, and the lose sound is going to be defeat. And the paddle hit is going to be ball hit paddle, which I think right here, yep. And the bumper 1, ball hit wall 1, and ball hit wall 2, and ball hit wall 3, and finally the block explode sound right here. Now that we've done all this stuff, it's going to be... Now, what you're going to hear is some of this stuff will play back. Pretty much everything that I basically talked about inside the game will play back, except for also the block exploding sound. You'll hear the block exploding sound. You'll hear the music play back, and the intro loop as well as the gameplay loop. And now when you stop, obviously at this point, it's a good idea to save your scene. So remember that. So save your scene. And then what happens is when you go back and play, then it will be there, and you'll have it all there. And when I turned the audio scene down again, if that happens during playback, then it's going to be again too loud. So in terms of just being able to talk, I'll just turn it down a bit. Okay? Now all the music pieces will be kind of quiet, and the block explode sound will probably be a little loud. So Okay, so as you can see, we have all of those parts and pieces ready to go. Now, we can also test these things, by the way, with a number key if we wanted to do that. So that it is possible to do that if we wanted to do that. So if we wanted to, and we're starting to play the game, and we don't want to wade through the whole thing and play the whole game all the way through, you have to hit the play button. But if you hit the 1 button, I believe it'll automatically go into, and then 2 will automatically click the negative option, or you could just simply let the ball pass you, and that'll play the negative one. So that's the lose stinger versus the win stinger. Okay, so anyway, so now what we want to do is figure out why. So the sounds are not going to play. So again, we'll probably want to bring down the block explode sound. It's quite loud, so we'll pull that down a little bit here too. And one of the things that you might discover, especially when you start designing this stuff, is how long the sounds can tail through. Because you can't make really super long ones. Because if it's constantly sort of playing the sounds in sort of instancing, where it's kind of layering it, plays this using something called play one shot, which sort of layers the sounds over each other. And you can get away with somewhat longish sounds, but not for too long. So sometimes I've had students make long block explode sounds, and then they put them in the game, and they find out, what doesn't work basically all that well. Okay, so anyway, yeah. So now we're dealing with the paddle hit and the bumper hit. Okay, so we're gonna just do the paddle first, and then I'm gonna show you the bumpers after that. So the paddle hit, you're gonna find the object labeled paddle, which is right here. And under paddle hit, you're going to add a script. And the script you want to add is done through add component. Okay? Add component. And from here, there's a menu that kind of displays. It's going down below the level of the window, but you can kind of see it there. I guess I could probably move it over to here. Is that possible? Roll it all up? Yeah, I could probably roll it all up like this. Here, I'll do that. So, add component. What we want to add in this case is a special script that I wrote called bumper paddle trigger. So it's going to go BUMP. All you have to do is that. So when you do that, you can see that one is there. You double click that, and now that's what's going to happen. Now, the first thing that bumper paddle trigger script needs is it needs a reference to the audio control object so that it can figure out what function on the script to basically trigger, essentially. So it's pretty easy, but we just need to either drag over the object or select it from the list. And again, this has to be the game object in the scene and not the game object that's in the assets folder. Remember, so that if you do this dot method, do not choose the assets tab, choose the scene tab, and choose the audio control object here. You can also drag it over from over here, audio control, like so, and release the mouse button. So now that we have this, we need to tell it to play the paddle sound. So we're going to do this, and by basically telling it a very specific thing. Now, the thing about computers and programming and all that sort of stuff, everything has to be completely explicit. We absolutely have to do it absolutely exactly as typed. So you're going to type the words exactly as shown. Capital P A D D L E and capital HIT. No space. And no lowercase on things. If you were to type paddle hit with lowercase h or paddle space hit, none of that would work. Only this works because there's only this function on the audio control script. So if anything is, named slightly differently, it's just going to come up with an error and it's not going to play what you want. So here's the paddle hit sound. Let's just give that a try. Now all we're doing is we're basically just sending it a message that on some condition, we're going to basically trigger the script. And I'll show you a little bit about that in just a bit. But let's just test and make sure that it even works. For this one, I'm going to probably mute my music just so, I don't hear a whole bunch of sounds. And the block explode, I think, is going to come down a bit more in volume, even more than before. So just as a testing kind of thing, essentially. Okay, save our scene, play it up. And now, when we play it, and we click the play button, there we go. Okay, and there we go. So that's an example of just testing that stuff out, and that's fine. So now we can move over to the bumpers. But let me just show you a little bit about how this sound is being triggered and why the sound is being triggered. Okay, so in this particular case, there is a physics action taking place in the game. So what happens is that when we're in the game, there is a condition in which the ball is bouncing off of the surface of the paddle, and what happens in that particular case is in physics called a collision. Okay. In Unity and in most kinds of game engines, there's basically something called a collider, which is its job is to essentially sort of create a sense of solidity to a game object of some kind or another. And it can be made of some kind of surface, or it can have certain kinds of physics characteristics so that, like, say, it has more friction or less friction, it's more bouncy or less bouncy. There's lots of different options. But what we use is a component called a collider to do that kind of stuff. And so that collider is going to be able to register events of different kinds. In this case, it's going to register that the collision basically happened effectively. So in the case of the script that's on this paddle, let's take a look at that. We take on the paddle, we got a bumper paddle trigger. So I'm going to double click that and open that up in, yep, that's it, in what's called Unity. Actually, this is Visual Studio Code. So what happens is you'll have this particular thing. There's all kinds of junk to talk about here, but the main issue here, if you're looking for, is called void on collision enter. And I will make it a little neater looking here. So what I'm going to do is basically when this collision on this object happens, so it automatically knows that there's, if there's a collider on this object, then this action will happen, basically. So on collision enter means when a collision starts, essentially. So the deal is when the collision starts, in this case, what happens is I am going to have a public game object. Now, public means that we can actually see it in the inspector. If you just simply typed game object and not public game object in this script, and you saved the script, it would automatically be what's called a private variable. So you would not actually see it in the inspector. It would not be visible. But with public, it is visible. So that's the idea. And then you can also then, drag over objects and set the variables and stuff like that. I could manually set the variable in the script if I wanted to. In other words, I could, under a particular option called start, I could potentially basically make this happen that every time that the game started, it would look for an object and look for a particular script and then hook all that stuff up. In professional game situations, that's often what happens. But again, from a learning perspective, we think that it's a better idea to be able to say, hey, you need to be able to hook this up and understand that this is a triggering mechanism, essentially. So for that particular case, what's happening is that it's going to go to the audio control object and it's going to say send message, and then this action is this public string. That's the string that you just did. Remember, that's the little text that you put in there that said paddle hit, okay? So it's going to send that information over to the audio control object, and specifically the audio control script. Now, what actually happens in this case, this is a very general kind of function. What it does is it looks on that game object to see if there's any function that matches the word based on this action. So in other words, it's going to look for an object called, or a function on an object, which means on any script, right? It can be on any script. It doesn't have to be just a script with that name. It needs to be a function in a script. But any function in that script that has that name, it will then basically just send a message to that script. Now, there was nothing really other to do than just do that. There's no parameter involved or anything like that. It just says do it or bang or whatever, essentially. That's the concept that's going on. Now, if we take a look at the other side of the fence, which is audio control, if we take a look at Breakout _, Unity audio control, now this one's a long one. It's got a few different things. It's got more stuff going on. But it does have, further down here, there's a bunch of different things here. But more importantly, all the way down back here, we have good old void paddle hit. So that's the idea, is that we are making this void paddle hit work with our send message object. And so that's what's happening is that the paddle hit is hitting, and then it says paddle bump source clip equals paddle hit, and then paddle bump source play. So in this particular case, what's happening is this particular method is the play method. There's also the play one shot method, which is slightly different. And so the play method basically just plays, and it could be interrupted if it needed to be. But in this case, it doesn't need to be because the ball bounces off pretty, and gives a fair amount of time before the next paddle hit is likely to happen. So basically that's the deal. And then we also have bumper 1, bumper 2, and bumper 3. And they basically have the same exact stuff. They are triggered the same way. So let's just show you how we hook those up overall. And it's kind of a similar situation to what we had before. And that is that we're going to go into they're going to be under the level object. So under the level object, there's these cube objects, cube, cube, cube. Each one of those cube objects is basically one of these sides. It's a stretched out cube, essentially. So the idea in this case is that we're going to go into this cube object, another cube object, another cube object. Now, what we could do is we could do the same exact action on each one of the cubes if we wanted to do that. Now, again, it's an important thing to think about. Okay, well, I only have to do these 3 objects. That's not a big deal. I could do them each one at a time. But what if you have to do 30? What if you have to do 300? What do you have to do 3,000? You have to think about how you're going to plow through potentially a lot of different objects in these kinds of situations that might be given to you, perhaps. So what you want to do in this case is select all 3, and we're going to basically perform the same function. Now, the string, that little text bit that we put in there, that text bit is going to be different for each one of them, but we can at least put the same script on all 3 objects using what's called multi-edit, okay? So that's very easy to do. All we have to do is hold down Shift key, hold down all those cube objects and click Add Component, and then from there, good old bumper paddle trigger, we already had it in the search field, so we just add that there. And the audio control object can also be added to because it needs to be used for all 3 of those bumper objects for sure, right? So we're just going to take our audio control object and we're going to put that over there like that. Now, each one of these is slightly different. So in this particular case, we're going to be clicking on each one of those cube objects. And then from the action, we're going to type bumper, B-U-M-P-E-R, and 1. No space, capital B. And again, if you typed it with a lowercase b, nothing will happen because of the fact that that's not the right term in the script. It's actually listed very clearly in the script as bumper 1, bumper 2, bumper 3. You see how it's being done? So that's going to have to be how you do it. Okay? So that's what we'll do. That's what the computer wants. That's what the computer gets. So bumper 2. And then bumper 3. Bumper 3. Okay. So now that we have that all done, that is basically all the sounds in the game. We're pretty much exactly where we need to be. Now, all we have to do is just sort of mix things a little bit and get that to work, essentially. Now, yeah, and we don't have the mixer here yet, right? So in this particular case, you can balance a couple of things against them. So in other words, you can balance the volume of the music against the volume of the other sound effects if you wanted to do that, or vice versa. You can do all kinds of things like that. And but I think we're going to basically be pretty good. I think I muted the music, so I'll bring it back. And this is going to be, it's not going to be as loud as it could be, but of course I'm talking, so I don't want to drown me out, comparatively speaking. So, all right. And now we go here. So on and so forth. Okay, so I'm not going to play it all the way through. It'll take way too long to play it all the way through to, completion. All right, so now we've basically got it fine. It more or less is balanced pretty well generally. And now all we want to do is we want to make ourselves a build. Okay, so let's talk about how we do that. So for that, we're going to go over here to Unity and we're going to click on the File menu. And this is the same for Mac and Windows. We're going to go over here to Build Settings, and that's going to bring up in a window. That's out of your range at the moment, but we're going to bring it back. And it's going to say all the different things. Now, right now, what will happen is that when you have Unity installed, it will automatically be able to work in what's called a standalone build. Okay, now the standalone build is going to be unique to each platform. So for Macintosh, it's going to be Mac OS builds. And for Windows, it'll be Windows builds. And then you can have other platforms, as you can see, many other platforms that are available. You can build for iOS or tvOS or Android or Xbox One or PS5 if you want to even. So many different options, as you can see. So, but of course, there's other kinds of situations and caveats that have to go with those particular platforms and stuff like that. So, in this particular case, this is a Macintosh, and we are here in this game. Now, one of the things that I do just for sort of an additional kind of like security or whatever you want to call it situation to make sure that everything is cool, I'm going to actually highlight this scene and then delete it. Now, in single scene projects, I find that sometimes it likes to use slightly older versions occasionally of the scene. So like sometimes you'll maybe have not saved the scene, or maybe it doesn't take somehow or another it didn't register that you'd saved the scene. So you might play it back and then find out it has old stuff, or like it doesn't have some sounds in it because of the fact that the previous saved version of the scene didn't have those sounds in it. So I always take the scene out of the build. Now this, again, doesn't necessarily happen in multi-scene builds, but in single scene builds, it seems to be still somewhat of a thing. So what you're going to do is highlight that scene, hit the delete key, and then click Add Open Scenes. That's going to add the scene that you currently have. As long as you've saved it, this will be basically what you'll have, and you'll be up to date. So now what we want to do is we want to click Build. Now for Macs, we have an option to be able to build. The default build is basically 64-bit Intel and Apple Silicon. So if you have machines, yeah, again, you could share this with other people who have Mac computers, and then they could basically play it. But if you know it's one or the other, you could just do an Intel 64-bit build or an Apple Silicon build, or if you wanted to do any of those things. Now on Windows, there's a 32-bit option and a 64-bit option, but I don't have currently Windows build support built into this at the moment. At least I don't think so. So, or maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, maybe I can do that actually. So, but for now, we're just going to do the Mac OS build. Just to give an idea of the differences, in a Mac OS build, you're going to get an app file, it's basically an application. It's just one single object, which does actually have all of the various resources and things like that inside it as a package, but you don't see that. It's just going to look like an app file, and when you double click on it, it will basically open up, and play. In the case of a Windows build, though, it's going to be slightly different. You're going to basically create a folder, and then it's going to actually create a folder inside that for the actual build. And that's going to have about 5 different files in it or so. All 5 files are generally needed to play the thing. There's going to be an exe file that'll kick off the whole thing, but you need there's a data file and there's a bunch of other stuff there that absolutely needs to be present. So, for example, if you wanted to share it with somebody, in this particular fashion, you need to zip up the folder of your build and send it off to them, and then they could play it through the exe file that's there. But they cannot play it if you just give them the exe file. Won't work, okay? So that's an important consideration to think about. In this case, we're going to choose our build here. By default, what it loves to do is put your build in the Unity project folder. And I have had at least numerous occasions in which students have done this, and they have actually corrupted their project as a result of this. Again, this might not be a big deal nowadays, but it certainly was a big deal in the past. So I get a little gun shy of this sort of stuff, so I don't recommend doing this. I say put it on the desktop, put it in the documents folder, somewhere else that's just out of the way, and you don't have to worry about it. So I'm going to click on desktop, and I'm going to say this is Breakout game Mac and test. So that's fine. And then I'm going to click save. And then it's going to go grind away, as you can see. And the first build usually takes the longest, but again, it's pretty simple game. It's going right through really fairly fast, so it's not going to take too long, comparatively speaking. Again, the first build usually takes the longest, and successive builds are going to be much, much faster usually. It all depends on what you have to do, that kind of thing. But once we've got this done, we've got the Breakout game Mac test. We double click on that, and here we go. I have failed again. Anyway, so I hope you don't fail in your situation and that you have gotten something out of this. Anyway, so all right. So I hope that has been helpful in terms of getting yourself acclimated a little bit to how to implement audio in a really simple, basic Unity audio game. Game Audio Institute has a lot more really cool game lessons that'll help you learn even more about how the audio works inside Unity, both for 3D as well as 2D. And we'll be doing lots more of these kinds of implementation videos in the future, so stay tuned for that. If you're interested in signing up for our, just finding out what's going on, you can subscribe, and if you hit the notification bell, you'll know when our new videos are going to drop, and we're going to be certainly adding a lot more videos to this kind of stuff. And again, as before, if you want to join our Patreon, you can go and do that as well, and because we would love to have some support so that we can continue to make these awesome vids for you guys. All right, take care, and we'll see you in the next ones. Bye.